Привет всем, с вами я, Janey, и это How Janey Learned Russian, and you can too. We are back after a long, much needed winter's break, ready to get back to work on accusative case. So we're going to finish that out this month, and then next month we start on one of the most difficult cases, which is genitive, but it's also one of the most important cases. So I hope you had a chance over this month-long break that we've had to get caught up on everything. And I hope you're following along in the textbook. And also, I hope that now, new year, new you, you're motivated to come join us in some of our group lessons. So let's go ahead and review, since it's been such a long while since we last met, let's go ahead and review what we talked about in last month's video about going to with v and na when it's a destination. So here we go. Let's go ahead and practice. Let's practice translating these sentences into Russian. So here we go. А как сказать по-русски I want to go to Russia? Okay, we're not saying in Russia, on Russia, at Russia. So when it's a destination, there's movement involved, we get accusative case. So я хочу поехать в accusative case Россию. Я хочу поехать в Россию. Okay, следующее. Red Square is in Russia. There's no movement here. There's no going, right? So we're going to go back to, do you remember that thing called prepositional case? Or did you forget everything over the break? Красная площадь в России. Красная площадь в России. Все, вот так. Следующее. I'm watching a video. Not looking at, but watching a video. Okay, so here, let's try it. I'm watching a video. Я смотрю. And then video is neuter. Я смотрю видео. Все. Я смотрю видео. Oh, wow, let's look at this one. I'm looking at your photo. And let's also do a neuter here. So you could say fotografia, but in spoken speech, it's more likely they're going to say foto. Foto, right? Foto. То, okay, so when we say looking at, we need to add in a little na. That was one of our phrases that we learned last time. So я смотрю на твое фото. Да? Я смотрю на твое фото. Okay? Следующий. Petersburg, St. Petersburg, is not very similar to Moscow. Okay, so remember, we get that set phrase, похож, похоже, похоже, похожий, plus на, plus accusative case. So let's try it. Санкт-Петербург, masculine, не очень похож на, and then Moscow's going to get accusative case, на Москву. Вот так. Санкт-Петербург не очень похож на Москву. Вот. Next one. I love Red Square. Okay, so if you remember, Krasnaya площадь, okay, that's a feminine. But let's remember that feminines ending in мягкий знак, the noun does not change in accusative case. The adjective describing it will change, but the noun does not change. So let's try it. Я люблю Красную площадь. Я люблю Красную площадь. Вот так. Okay, next one. I'm going to class. Okay, so let's figure out our word for class here. It could be занятие, which is a neuter, or it could be урок. But either way, both of these are an event. What does that tell us about whether we need v or na? So this one should be я иду на урок. Я иду на урок. Занятие and урок, both, they're not feminine singular, so they don't change. But hopefully you remembered that events get на. Окей, хорошо. Дальше. Интересный кусочек информации дня. Это, remember, we have a theme going here for accusative case. Что надо увидеть в Москве? Куда надо пойти в Москве? So, what do you need to see in Moscow? Where do you need to go? This is quite possibly my number one favorite thing in Moscow, is this place. It's like, it was my happy place. I would just go there just to relax and just walk around. So, обязательно надо пойти в Новый Девичий монастырь. Да, вот это монастырь. Но лучше, so even more than the монастырь, I loved the кладбище. Да, Обязательно надо пойти на Новодевичье кладбище. Okay, so кладбище meaning the cemetery. And why is this cemetery so cool? It's like tons of famous people are buried here. Look, let's see if you recognize any of these. Chekhov, Anton Pavlovich Chekhov, Gogol, right? There used to be a statue of Gogol here when I lived there, so I don't quite know where the statue went. But you've got Gogol. Also, like anybody who loves Russian history and culture, it's going to be so fun to go there because you're going to recognize all these famous names. And then there's tons of political leaders. So you've got Eisenstein, that's the a very famous film director, Shalyapin, Mayakovsky, who, remember, he lost his battle with Russian roulette. Then we have some politicians, right? We've got Nikita Sergeyevich Khrushchev. Look right there. There's his grave. The Gorbachevy, Mikhail, and what was her name? Raisa. I just read his biography. And then Nadezhda Aliluyeva. I just read Stalin's biography last year. And so that's her grave. And people said that he spent a lot of time standing here by her grave over the years. And then I remember when I came here in 2007, this grave from Boris Yeltsin, he had just freshly been buried. So they keep them above ground, I think, for 40 days, and then they put them in and put the grave marker. So I've seen like this spot, but he was above ground at that point when I saw Yeltsin. So now they've put the grave. But yeah, so again, if you know anything about Russian culture, Russian history, these are all, like, it's super fun to walk through the cemetery and see all these names you recognize. Not to mention, I love cemeteries everywhere because I just think it's super interesting. And I also think it's interesting how different cultures, pay homage to their dead. So I think it's very fascinating. So, what? Quick little reminder, this all is part of my textbook, Russian Cases Made Slightly Less Scary. That's available over on Patreon. I've been so pleased over the winter break that people have been coming on and buying their books, and hopefully you're super motivated to buckle down and learn your Russian grammar. Please buy it on the website, not the app. The app charges you like an extra $20. I don't even get it. Also, please join us for classes. They're going and they're super fun, and you just pay a monthly membership fee and you can attend as many classes as you want. And then you have a link to videos if you want to go back and watch anything that you missed. In the intermediate classes, we're currently watching Russian movies, and that's super fun to go through and kind of use them as our inspiration for things to talk about. So, in today's video, and this is a very common question people have in English and in Russian, is kind of the difference between like and love, right? So today we're going to review what we've already learned about Nravится. We learned that in nominative case. And then we're going to compare it and kind of side by side it with Любить, right? So in the book, I talk about, like, dude, in both English and Russian, you should never tell somebody "Я люблю тебя" on the first date. No, you do. You can say "Ты мне нравишься." That's totally fine. You're not going to freak that person out. But let's not go straight to the любить, okay? So just like, I'll give you some things. Like, Russian does a lot of understating stuff. So you don't go super intense on the loving necessarily. So you're going to say a lot of nравится. But then at some point, if you feel really strongly about things, you're more than welcome to up the intensity and say любить. But guess what? The thing you love is going to get accusative case. So today, let's review мне нравится, how that works. And then we're going to bounce back and forth in between. Нравится, любить. Нравится, любить. It's going to hurt your brain. Just preemptively take some headache pills right now. Okay, хорошо. So let's remind ourselves how нравится works. Remember, you're not doing anything to the direct object. So say you like музыка. You're not doing anything to the muzika if you're using nravится. If you're liking it, you're literally saying, muzika is pleasing to me. Music is pleasing to me, right? And that's why here you're getting a preview of dative case pronouns. Вам, мне, тебе, etc. Those are dative case because to me, to you, etc. So say you wanted to ask somebody, what music is pleasing to? Какая музыка вам нравится? Какая музыка вам нравится? Right? And then, so notice that's nominative case. You're not doing anything to the music. It is the subject of the sentence. It's the thing doing the verb, which is why it's getting nominative case. Okay? So then if you want to come back and say, you like classical music, мне нравится классическая музыка. You don't need to change it, okay? So that's the advantage of нравится, is you don't have to put the thing you like into a case. Now, however, once we start talking about who likes what, well, then you got to know, if you're going to venture beyond the pronouns, you got to know some dative case about how to say my brother likes, okay? So both of these formats have their pluses and minuses. Okay, here's another one. Тебе нравятся такие машины? Тебе нравятся такие машины? Okay, so notice нравятся here, because we have a plural. We're saying those kinds of cars, right? So whereas música up here was a singular, down here we have a plural. Нравится. Interestingly, in spoken speech, you can't hear the difference between the two. And then lastly, for example, you can talk about something you don't like. Мне не нравится математика. Мне не нравится математика. Вот. Okay, so in the book, this is all on page страница 45. I'm just going to have it here on the screen for you. But you can go through and kind of review those things. So for example, we have, so here's a grammar analysis. Мне нравится русская музыка, right? The thing you like doesn't change. Now look how it starts to get a little complicated when we want to tell somebody else likes something. Моему мужу нравятся русские фильмы. So this is where people are like, oh, I don't feel comfortable with dative case, I'm gonna go over here to любить because I feel comfortable with accusative case. So versus the same exact sentence over here. So you would have something like мне нравится русская музыка. But now if you want to say I love Russian music, я люблю, accusative case, русскую музыку. Okay? Then we wanted to say your husband likes Russian films, but you don't know how to say my husband in dative case. Well, then you could come over here to accusative. Мой муж любит русские фильмы. And that one was especially easy because it wasn't a feminine singular, so it was super easy to put it into nominative case. Okay, now if the thing you like is an animate object, that's when maybe it's safe to stay with нравится, because guess what? You don't have to put that animate object into a case, right? So, нам нравятся наши студенты. So, наши студенты, that's just nominative case. That's super easy. Whereas, if you want to say you love your students, мы любим наших студентов. And this goes back to that flow chart that we did at the beginning of accusative case, remember? If it is not a feminine singular, it splits into animate versus inanimate. And if it's an animate object, and it's not a feminine singular, it's going to get genitive case. And you don't know genitive case yet. So you can just do нравится when talking about animate things. Okay, хорошо. So now we do the headache-inducing activity. Okay, so we are going to bounce back and forth between saying you like something and saying you loved that exact same thing. Here we go. Мне нравится русская литература. Мне нравится русская литература. Okay, get ready. I want you to say you love Russian literature, which for me is more appropriate. I don't just like Russian literature. I love Russian literature. Okay, so we would say я люблю русскую литературу, because русская литература is a feminine singular and not animate. Вот. Number 2. Вам нравятся славянские языки? So we're asking, do you like Slavic languages? Well, guess what? This isn't a feminine singular. It's not animate. So this is going to be super easy to put into a loving sentence. Я люблю славянские языки. Это, кстати, это правда. Я очень люблю славянские языки. Вот. Okay, next one. Какая музыка тебе нравится? Okay, so какая музыка, feminine, do you like? All right, now we want to be like, what kind of music do you love? Okay, so какая музыка is a feminine singular. We're going to need to change it. Какую музыку ты любишь? Вот так. Okay, now we're going to go the opposite direction. We're going to start with a loving sentence, and you're going to put it into a liking sentence. Okay, so the loving sentence is Ты не любишь большие города? You don't love big cities? Okay? Ты не любишь большие города. How would we make that into a liking? You don't like big cities? So guess what? We can just keep this same большие города. It wasn't a feminine singular, so it's gonna stay the same as nominative. Тебе не нравятся большие города? Вот так. Okay? Next one. Природа здесь нам очень нравится. The nature here is very pleasing to us. We really like the nature here. Okay? So the thing that is pleasing is the природа, not the здесь. Okay? And природа is a feminine singular. So we need to say мы очень любим природу здесь. Вот так. Okay? Also, so this next one is going to be pairing любить with a verb. You love to do something. I have seen it said in Russian textbooks that if you want to say that you like to do something, right, pairing it with another verb, it is more authentic to say я люблю plus the verb, okay? I'll be interested to see if any Russians say, something other. Like it's totally understandable if you say нравится, and I hear Russians say it all the time, but I'm just letting you know that in American textbooks, they often say that it's more authentic to pair, if you want to say that you like to do something, it's more authentic to pair it with любить. Я люблю танцевать, я люблю готовить, я люблю спать, etc. So, we have the sentence, do you love to cook? Вы любите готовить? So, the other thing we could do is, вам нравится готовить. Вот так. Можно вот так. Okay, this one's interesting. I love him. I love him. Я люблю его. Maybe you don't love him anymore. He's now been downgraded to just a liking. Okay, how would we say, he is pleasing to me? He is pleasing to me. Он мне нравится. Он мне нравится. Вот так. Okay, следующее. So now I'm going to, this is kind of an oral drill. I want you talking out loud to yourself like a crazy person, okay? I'm going to say something, and you are going to give me a gradation of whether you like it or you love it, okay? And I'll show you both ways, and then I'll tell you, for me personally, I like this thing, or for me personally, I love this thing, okay? And again, if you're liking, the thing you like doesn't change. If you're loving, the thing you like only changes if it's a feminine singular, or a feminine singular. Okay, here we go. Русская музыка. Вы любите это? Вам нравится это? А я люблю русскую музыку. Я очень люблю русскую музыку. И мне очень нравится народная русская музыка. Да, мне нравится народная русская музыка. Мне нравится русская музыка. Я люблю русскую музыку. Okay? Танцевать. So, if you wanted to say, well, for me, I love to dance. So I'm going to say я люблю танцевать. Я очень люблю танцевать даже. Or you could say мне нравится танцевать. Then if you wanted to get into specifics, like what kinds of dances you like, мне нравятся латинские танцы, мне нравится хип-хоп, мне нравится свинг, например. Okay? Иностранные языки. Okay? Do you love foreign languages or do you like foreign languages? Да? Okay, я скажу. Мне нравятся иностранные языки, но я очень люблю славянские языки. Да? Например, я говорю по-португальски, но мне не нравится португальский язык. Мне очень нравится бразильская музыка, но мне не нравится португальский язык. А мне очень нравятся славянские языки. Очень люблю славянские языки. Okay, next one. Russian men. Oh, this one's an animate. Okay? So if you love Russian men, maybe just for the sake of simplicity and just, grammar, maybe just understate it and say that you like them, okay? Because otherwise, this is getting into genitive plural territory, which is brutal, okay? So, русские мужчины. Мне очень нравятся русские мужчины, кстати, да. Мой русский друг Костя очень нравится. Он у меня самый лучший друг. Очень хороший чебурашка у меня. Вот, okay. Now, if you wanted to be fancy and say that you love Russian men, я люблю русских мужчин. Oh, good luck with that, okay? Or maybe you don't like Russian men, in which case you could say мне не нравятся русские мужчины. Вот. Моя работа. Or you could also say своя работа. Okay? So you can say, maybe you're like, it's fine. Да, нравится моя работа. Да, мне нравится моя работа. Но я, Дженни, я люблю мою работу. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it because I do it essentially for free. So I love it. It's very fun and I'm very passionate about it. То есть я очень люблю мою работу. Вот. Okay, so next we have a что plus делать. How would we ask somebody, what do you like to do? If you want to be official, according to textbooks, you could say, что вы любите делать? Что вы любите делать? Да? Otherwise, you could also say, что вам нравится делать? Вот. And then lastly, we want to ask somebody, what kind of music do you love? What kind of music do you like? Okay? Вот, so I'm gonna give you some of like my various levels. Хорошо, какая музыка мне нравится? Мне нравится почти вся музыка, кроме кантри, да? Мне не нравится кантри, но мне нравится bluegrass. Вот, мне очень нравится хип-хоп, соул, и я очень люблю музыку фанк, Стиви Уондер, Motown, это я очень люблю. Также я очень люблю бразильскую музыку, да. Еще что мне нравится? Не весь хард-рок мне нравится, но мне очень нравится, даже я очень люблю группу Tool, это моя самая любимая группа, и еще что мне нравится? Русская музыка мне нравится, украинская музыка мне нравится, и да, вот, хотя мне не нравится португальский язык, я очень люблю бразильскую музыку, потому что очень приятно, очень весело танцевать под эту музыку. Мне очень нравится бразильская музыка. Okay, so hopefully you guys kind of practiced going back and forth between those. So now I'm going to ask you some questions and you just answer them for yourself. Okay, pay attention to what case you put things in. If you say люблю, you got to go accusative singular. If you say нравится, the thing you like doesn't change. Okay? So, что вам нравится? Что вам нравится? Да? Например, мне нравится музыка, мне нравится гулять, особенно мне нравится гулять в лесу, мне нравится природа, мне нравятся птицы, мне очень нравятся деревья, да, то есть, или даже почти все растения мне очень нравятся, еще что мне нравится, пляж, мне нравится, окей, следующее, что вы любите делать, окей, я уже говорила, я очень люблю танцевать, я очень люблю заниматься спортом, очень люблю гулять, очень люблю изучать языки, я очень люблю делать свои видео, уроки. И что вам... And then our last question is, что вам не нравится? Okay, so you probably know this, мне очень не нравится математика. Очень не нравится. Мне очень не нравятся мыши. Блeh, ужас. Еще что мне не нравится. Мне не нравится мясо. Очень не нравится курица. Запах ужасный. Еще что не нравится. Мне не очень нравится дождь. Да, мне нравится солнце или снег, а дождь и ветер нет, не нравится. Вот, хорошо. И мне очень не нравится, даже ненавижу, мне не нравятся пробки. Пробки. Traffic. Да, у нас в Вашингтоне самые ужасные пробки в США. Ужас. Мне очень не нравится. Я люблю ходить пешком. Я люблю ездить на метро. А я не люблю сидеть в пробках все время. Вот. Окей, хорошо. Это все. So that's everything for today. Увидимся завтра for another quick review of everything we've learned so far. So we're getting close to the end of our accusative case chapter. Хорошо, это все. Увидимся на следующем уроке. Пока-пока.